War is an awful thing. It's a time that demands sacrifice and courage for all involved, with most people who put themselves in the line of fire for the sake of others rarely making it out alive. But not all heroes who were willing to risk their lives for the sake of others carried guns or marched on the front lines. Some of them were at home, driving steam engines. It was a warm, moonlit night on the 2nd of June 1944. At 12:15 a.m, a munitions train set off from Whitemoor Marshalling Yard, pulled by a War Department austerity, driven by driver Benjamin Gimbert and fireman James Nightall. The train was made up of 51 open-topped wagons. 34 of them carried several 250-pound US general-purpose aircraft bombs, 2 were loaded with 500-pound aircraft bombs, 1 empty truck, and the rest were loaded with fuses, detonators, and tail fins for said bombs, with a guard's van at the back of the train. All the trucks had been sheeted to protect their cargo from sparks from the locomotive, and the train was making good time. At around 2 a.m, Gimbert slowed the train as it approached Soham Station, when he noticed steam coming from the left-hand injector. While looking out the side of the cab to get a better view of the problem, he spotted flames inside the leading wagon directly behind the engine, a wagon containing 44 500-pound bombs. Realizing the situation, he carefully brought the train to a stop and sounded the engine's whistle to alert the guard. Once the engine stopped, Gimbert told Nightall to uncouple the burning wagon from the rest of the train, telling him to take the coal hammer with him to break the coupling should the metal be too hot to touch. In less than a minute, Nightall uncoupled the truck and was back on the footplate as Gimbert slowly moved the engine and the burning wagon forwards, approaching the signal box at the station entrance. Signalman Frank Bridges stepped out of his box carrying a fire bucket. Gimbert called to Bridges, telling him to stop all traffic. Just past the station was open country, and both Gimbert and Nightall knew that if they could get the wagon there, it'd explode without risk of killing anyone. The engine and wagon were slowly making their way along the platform, having made it 140 yards away from the rest of the train when the explosives finally went off. Nearly 5 tons of munitions detonated in the middle of Soham Station, throwing the engine off the rails, levelling the entire building, and leaving a massive crater 66 feet wide. The people of the village were awoken by the noise, with most finding their windows broken and their doors blown open from the force of the explosion. Many folks went out into the street to see what had happened, finding the local gasworks consumed by fire. As fire crews tended to the flames, attention soon turned to the railway station, which was now essentially non-existent. Nightall's body was found laying charred not too far from the engine, which was on its side. Bridges too was found dead on the platform, having received a severe head injury. Gimbert meanwhile was found in the doorway of the railway pub, dazed and bloodied. He was alive but had no recollection of how he got there. Meanwhile, the guard of the train, 59-year-old H.C. Clark, had relit all the lamps on the brake van and was now walking the 2.5 miles back down the line to Barway Siding signal box to alert the railway what had happened, placing detonators on the line as he went to warn any oncoming engines. Clark arrived at the signal box at 3:30 a.m, with the signalman describing him as in a very dazed condition. It wasn't until the sun rose that the scale of the explosion could be fully realized. Not only was the station destroyed, but 15 other houses were completely wrecked, while another 36 were rendered temporarily uninhabitable. Countless other houses received minor damage, and the gasworks had suffered significantly from the fire. At the station, both lines were destroyed. The wagon that contained the explosives was effectively vaporized. The only parts of it that were ever found was a single buffer and a socket casting. The tender of the locomotive was completely mangled, while the locomotive itself remained relatively structurally sound, with most of the damage it received affecting its platework and boiler lagging. The first 4 wagons of the rest of the munition train were peppered with shrapnel, but otherwise fine. Though the damage was extensive and the station was effectively levelled, things would have been a lot worse if it wasn't for Gimbert and Nighthall's brave attempt to get the burning truck away from the rest of the train. Should all of the wagons have exploded, it's likely Soham would have been levelled completely. A breakdown train and various army support troops arrived in Soham at dawn, tending to the injured and setting about repairing the line. Incredibly, by 8:20 PM, just 18.5 hours after the explosion, the line was repaired and trains were running through Soham again, with temporary booking offices set up for passengers to buy tickets at the station. At the same time, an investigation was launched to find the cause of the explosion. It's noted that all of the wagons were sheeted properly apart from 3, one of them being the leading truck that caught fire. Rather than the sheets hanging over the side of the trucks, they were tucked inside around the bombs, a practice that was generally not done as it could allow sparks to drop into the wagon. On top of this, further investigations found some of the wagons had a layer of straw scattered across the bottom of them, meaning they weren't properly cleaned out before being loaded with munitions. The leading truck that caught fire had previously carried sulfur, and after being unloaded and inspected, small quantities of sulfur were found left over in other wagons that were said to have been cleaned. Even after another thorough sweeping, there was still residual sulfur left over in the wagons, meaning that even if the leading truck had been cleaned from top to bottom, it's likely there was some residual dust left over. What exactly ignited it is still unknown, but the tarp covering the load contained the fire, making it hard to see until it was too late. It's incredible to think that, for all the damage the explosion caused, the only lives lost were those of Nighthall, Bridges, and a horse in a nearby field. For their bravery, both Gimbert and Nighthall were awarded the George Cross. In the years since the incident, a memorial has been placed in honour of their bravery, and a plaque was unveiled when the station was reopened in 2021. 2 Class 66 locomotives in service today also carry their names. Like I said, war is a dangerous and terrible thing, but it's important to remember that not all heroes laid down their lives on the front lines. Some of them did it on the railway lines. Subscribe for more.